What we're doing in spiritual enrichment today is hearing from Julie McConnell. We'll get there in a moment.
Okay, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I know everybody in the room and online. That's awesome. Good to see all these faces. I realized in putting together this presentation, I've been away from PowerPoint for about 20 years, and it shows. So I apologize in advance. It's not a great presentation, but I just wanted to make sure that there was something that you could kind of look at if I wasn't being clear, and just help structure how I present what I learned at Faith Leaders Week. Faith Leaders Week is a conference that's put on every year by Northwestern University. It's part of the business school, Kellogg, and their nonprofit business management. And it was a very interesting group of people, both presenting and as part of the attendees. Most of the presenters were from the business school. Several were in the business school and pastors, at least a couple. And then there was a wonderful panel discussion at the end with the senior rabbi at Shalom up in Glencoe, David Crawford, who is the head of the Presbyterian Seminary down in McCormick at UC, and Horace Smith, who is the senior pastor at Apostolic Faith Church on the south side, 3200 south or so. He's been the senior pastor for about 25 years there, and he's also on the dime of Northwestern University as a pediatric oncologist. So he's a super impressive group of people, and boy, they had a lot of ideas. So if you can go ahead to the
Julie,
first.
just a question. Before you begin, could you just share how the event came to be, like how it originated? I think sometimes people think like the business school might be at odds with a church or ecumenical
Right.
event.
I think that Faith Leaders Week was the brainchild of Dr. Nicholas Pierce, who is an organizational behavior professor at Northwestern and is an associate pastor at the Apostolic Faith Church. And so he lives in both of these worlds. And he saw that a lot of the things that he was doing in the area of organizational behavior could be very useful to churches in navigating this tumultuous time that we're in. So 24 participants, all stripes, mostly pastors from Methodist, Presbyterian, UCC, Episcopal. There were a couple of Jewish congregations represented. There were people who served as chaplains. There was a woman who ran a parochial school, and coast to coast. So it felt like a very nice cross section that way of from people around the country, different congregations, and also there was senior pastor from the urban church in Memphis with, he said he had 900 parishioners per week in a typical week. Yeah, down to a guy from Michigan who has 30 people. And so it led to such rich conversation. And so we, in the course of the week, we had a series of speakers come in and talk to us, and it was like a fire hose of information. And then we would go off and just talk about what we had seen, and we could see it through these many perspectives. And so one of the main things that was mentioned is that right now is a very hard time to be a pastor because of, especially, there were trends that were in the make before COVID. COVID really accelerated trends that were already in place. And so the thinking in putting together this conference was to bring people together who are facing these issues, to think about how we can address them, but also, I think, to leave people inspired and to have hope that even though it's a time of great transition, there's a lot of opportunity in transition. And so we need to take advantage of that. We can go to the next. So I went into this conference with these goals to just get a better understanding of the issues faced and to get a sense of if the issues that we face are unique to us or if they're more general. And also to learn from the successes and failures that other people had. People talked about, there were some very interesting stories that came up. One guy from New Jersey was saying that the numbers had dropped so much in his church that he had started taking chairs out of the sanctuary so that it wouldn't seem so empty. Also, one of my goals was just to collect good ideas. That was not one that I wanted to let that one go. But also just networking with the other faith leaders who were there. And so by the end of the week, it felt like a very cohesive group. And I had talked to almost every single person individually. There's one person who I didn't quite get to, but it was very productive in that way. So we started out by talking about the changing dynamics around church, which we've all seen over the past several years. I remember Joe Shank saying that he had presided over the decline of, the gentle decline of the congregation, and he kind of laughed about it, but I mean, it's a real thing and it's happening everywhere. I mean, the guy with the 900 people at church, he had been noticing a big drop off. He said, it had gone down to more like 600 sometimes. And, those numbers are amazing. We'd love to see that here, but that's a lot of people leaving and finding other programs. Yeah. And so one of the things that COVID brought is new routines. With churches shut down, I mean, it wasn't even an option to come to church. So people found new things to do. They decided that they liked reading the newspaper in their pajamas on Sunday morning with a cup of coffee. And of course, there's the secular programming. I mean, we experienced that with hockey, with gymnastics, with volleyball. You name the sport, there are times when they take Sunday morning. In fact, last year we had a volleyball tournament over Easter weekend. On Easter Sunday. It's crazy.
Yeah.
One of the other trends is there's a more transactional relationship with church, that people want to feel like they're getting something. And so one of those things may be a spiritual enrichment, like what we're seeing now, but there are other, it's not like a duty to go to church, or your neighbors aren't saying, well, you weren't in church. So the dynamics have just changed, so that you really need to figure out how to get people to desire to come to church. So BIP, does anybody know what BIP is? Butts and pews. Butts and pews.
Giving away all the trade.
But it always was the case that butts and pews was the measure of success. And so one of the interesting speakers that we had was from the business school, is talking about, okay, this isn't really the right measure of success anymore, because successful churches are having offerings at more times. And we have an online offering. So just looking at who's there on Sunday does not give you the whole picture. And, we need to think about how better to measure our success. How are we reaching people?
Isn't that kind of a rationalization? Why aren't people coming? Those people coming to church anymore and just watch on TV?
Well, I think a lot of but I think that there are a lot of factors now with competitive programming, with just kind of cultural issues among younger people that were not there before. And so while it may seem like rationalizing, I think that there is some truth to it. And so the question is how, how to get to those people and get them to desire to come.
What do we have to offer?
Right.
Or that they really need. as
Right.
opposed to
Right.
What they want to do.
Yeah. So when I thought of the fire hose of information that came at me in the course of the week, and I really nailed it down, there were three main things that I thought were very interesting, and I'll get into more detail on each of these. Relevance, everybody wants to be relevant. And we see it in politicians for sure. But our church wants to be relevant. We want to be a part of the community. I mean, think of our history, that all of the things that we are responsible to make Winnetka a better place to live. And so that is a challenge right now for churches with fewer people attending and trying to figure out just how to be more relevant in the community. Hubris, I'll just say a quick sentence on each of those, and then we'll go ahead to the next slide. That is that we've been around for 150 years. We deserve to be around for another 150 years without changing anything.
Just because.
Just because.
Well, that's
another word for ego?
Pardon me, Lucy?
Is that another word for ego?
Yeah, yeah,
More relatable for people.
yeah. And then leadership. So the speaker on leadership was a military officer who and oh my gosh, you knew he was in the room, and he was a real character, but he now is on staff at Northwestern talking about leadership. And I think in the military it's very structured, and they have a very good way of creating and honing leaders. The difference between leadership and management was kind of interesting to me, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. So when I think about the relevance of our church, my mind goes to the 4th of July, Elm Street, Winnetka. The parade goes by. You can't believe how many families with young children are out there. This community is loaded with young families. A lot of houses turned over during COVID. And those people, the people that we want, they're here around us. But because of what I mentioned before, Sunday morning service may not be the right or the best way to reach them. And so it's a little bit of a puzzle on how to get them here to want to come through the door, right? As I mentioned before, church more transactional. But one of the speakers who came in was a young Black woman, about 28 years old, and she's a pastor. And she talked about the future of ministry is life stage ministry. One general offering to the masses is not where it's at anymore. And she said, you know, just having groups for people who are at different life stages, empty nesters. We have that with Flurry's Wine, Women, and God. You know, people who are newly divorced, maybe they'd like to have a group of people to talk with about what's going on. She went through a list of different kinds of life experiences. I mean, parents of teenage children. That is helpful to have people to talk to when you're in that situation. And so the whole idea was, if you are able to meet people where they are and provide what they need, that's the key to relevance. Go to the next one. Hubris. Yeah, so one of the main reasons that churches fail is the ego. Like, we're great. There isn't anything we could be doing better. And I think that we, because we are doing regular strategic planning kind of exercises, I think that's a great opportunity to take a step back and look at who we are and think about who we want to be. Also, the point was made that with the pandemic, you know, and just kind of coming out of the pandemic, this is a great time to make changes. Because if it doesn't work, you know, oh, we just tried that because of the pandemic, you know, the pandemic kind of gives you cover. But it doesn't mean that you have to go out and change everything, you know, but finding a few things that work is key. And there was a speaker who came in who talked about, you know, don't try and be everything to everyone. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. And, you know, maybe you have one topic that you walk through with the congregation for a couple of years and you just keep coming back to. And I feel like we kind of did that with in Joe Shank's last year with the red ribbons. You know, we kind of had that flow. And I remember not wanting to miss because it was like, well, where are we going to go next? You know, and it felt like we were kind of on a journey together. And I think that is a good way to address this issue. You can go to the next one. Okay, leadership. So Bernie Banks, the military guy, was saying that if you're managing your church, then you're just keeping things going. But leadership is required to bring meaningful change. And leadership doesn't mean I'm the boss, I'm going to go out and do whatever I want. It's bringing people along with you and figuring out what talents are here and drawing out those talents from the people around us. He talked about leadership as guiding the change. So not having to do it all, but just to guide that, and also being willing to fail. So that I thought was very interesting to me. There were a couple of comments that he shared with us. He said, people want to know that you care. They don't care what you know. People want to know that you care. They don't care what you know.
Phrase it this way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
See, also, leadership has,
Exactly.
a leader has a vision of where they're going, where we are all going together.
Right.
That's the key.
And that
Right.
vision has to
That's a
be
key.
clearly
Enumerated.
Enumerate, apparent to the people that are.
With different
Yeah.
segments of different interests or age groups.
Right,
Yeah.
that's a good point. Yeah. We can go to the next one, because I wanna get to the end of these and then just, open up for.
We'll bring in people on the screen.
Yeah, that's great, that's great. Okay, so, I mentioned this already, that, when we reimagine the future faith community, like what we could be, we want to try and be everything, but that's not, that we need to focus and figure out what we do really well and not, and do that. Life stage ministry, I mentioned, based on who's in the community, the phase of life, what people need. I think more support for women who work full-time and have children at home. So let's see, the desire to be at church, and children too need to desire to be at church. I think that, I mean, for me, I have high school age girls. It's hard to get them out of the bed on Sunday morning. And, you know, so I wish that there was more desire on their part, and we're working on that. Also, this was very interesting. People want an encounter. They want to have something that can't be duplicated somewhere else. And a big part of that is fellowship. So, and for me, that was the part of online church that was really fell short for me, is that I missed seeing all of you and being able to have the conversations at the end of the church service. And for some people, maybe that fellowship is even more important than the sitting in the service. We don't want spectators, you know, people who just sit and watch and then leave and don't contribute at all. And so I think that, my impression of this church is that we don't have a lot of spectators. It seems like people are very active. And I love this. This was aimed at the pastors. Don't preach to the invisible balcony of people you wish were here. To yourself. But preach to the people before you. And yeah, I thought that was, I thought that was very interesting. So
How about converse instead of preach?
what was that, Ellen?
How about converse with your before you rather than preach?
Well, and you know, that's a good point. To build one's faith, I don't know that everybody wants to be talked at. This kind of conversation to me works a lot better. And I mean, that's part of the confirmation process, is the conversation about faith. And that kind of teaching, I think, is useful for adults too.
That's what we're doing here.
Yeah, yeah.
And I would just want to add a clause to the second to last bullet point.
Yeah.
I would love to see that reframe to, we make a point of reaching out to spectators, or embracing spectators and nurturing them for what it is that they need.
Sure,
Good.
you're not gonna turn away people.
Yeah.
who
Right.
is a little passive.
Good point. Good point.
Especially at the beginning of their encounter
Yeah.
with the church, they're not gonna wanna jump 100% in.
Yeah,
Right.
Right.
people come to church
They
for
need to
so
stick
many
you.
reasons.
Right.
Taking it back to you.
And I think,
Yeah.
and it troubles me to think that people would be excluded simply because maybe they're an introvert or
Mhm.
they're exhausted.
Because we
Yeah.
welcome
So-
everybody,
Yeah,
regardless if they've got nothing to.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
so I would just want to add a few clauses to that.
Yeah.
Good point. Good point. Thank
So
you.
we would-
Thank you.
So as we're having conversation in the room, folks on Zoom, if you want to unmute yourself and join in, you can. I think where Julie is probably going is to wrap it up,
Yeah,
and then we're going to go off the screen and back to the people on Zoom.
no,
But if you do have any comments, please speaking of not just being spectators, you are participants too.
Yeah, you can get to that.
Is she done, or is there more that she wants to say?
There's one more slide and I don't know.
Yeah, just that it's hard to be a pastor right now, but this is also an inflection point. Congregations that are willing to change are more likely to succeed and grow in this current environment. And what questions do you have?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
This is Lynn. I have a comment, if I may. I think one of the major declines of the mainline churches in particular was not mentioned, but I think it's the elephant in the room, is more and more people in modern society don't believe in God anymore. And if you don't have a faith at all or aren't inquisitive about it, there's no reason to go to a church. Instead, you would find your sense of community and fellowship in other kinds of groups.
For Julie's benefit, maybe everybody, could I reset sort of a common factual basis on this might be helpful. One thing I think Lynn is referring to is a conversation we had in the fall about the nuns. These are people who do not affiliate. And one of the presenters on one of those Sundays helped us understand who the nuns are. So about 30% of Americans are nuns.
Mhm.
They do not affiliate. It doesn't mean they don't believe in God necessarily. They do not affiliate. So if you remember, those of you who were here for those presentations, the nuns can be further broken down as 2/5 of nuns are atheist and agnostic. Not likely to have much interest in church, although they might come for social service program or a concert or something. 3/5 of nuns, so that's 3/5 of 30%, do your math. 3/5 of nuns are nothing in particulars. Do you remember? Nothing in particular doesn't mean even that you're hostile toward organized religion. It's just that you're neutral. It's like, not for me.
Doesn't have anything to offer, I think.
Well, yeah, like, but they might be persuadable to do a little bit more than a service project or a concert. They might be persuadable to come in for a discussion group or to attend a discussion group offsite or something like that. So not all nuns are the same, but Lynn's point is a very good one. 30% of Americans increasing by 1% each year. It has, at least for the last 20 years. That's not a prediction of the future. But let's say it is that in the future. That means 10 years from now, 40%. 20 years from now, 50%. So Lynn's, I hope that puts Lynn's comment in perspective. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, and I would say that is a salient issue that was not raised in this group of pastors.
Huh.
That, I mean, not that people weren't talking about it when I wasn't listening. I mean, if I really wasn't just involved in those conversations, but I don't remember that.
I'm surprised
Yeah.
it's not, because in the groups
Yeah.
of pastors I meet with, we talk about it all the time.
Yeah. I think I just
And
missed that.
not just as a problem, but as an opportunity.
Yeah, right, because read this.
We have a 35-year-old who just got married. He and his wife wanted him. I think this is common among that particular age group. They wanted nothing to do with a church. They didn't even want to be married in a church. And a lot of their friends I know they go online and their friends get a one-day certificate to be a pastor, and they marry one another. And the church, I think the church has really disappointed them in many, 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 many ways. You take a look at all the sexual abuse, the financial abuse, all kinds of things in the church. And I think some of the teachings of the church have been really negative. Think about you being a sinner from the get-go, from the time you're born. A lot of those kinds of things have really turned off a lot of people. And so I think there are a variety of things we really need to take a look at. And the other thing is, young people are working 24/7. They do not have, and so to take on another thing on a Saturday morning, or they may be working. My son works on Sundays. I mean, he has to work on Sundays. His wife has to work on Sundays. So I don't think that they need time to relax. They don't need to have one more thing to do. They're just trying to catch their breath. So it seems to me that there are so many factors here that we need to take a look at. What could we really offer them? But I think the one thing we could offer, John said this a long time ago. He said, this church is like a country club. And I thought at the time he said, and I think it was sort of a downput.
It was at the time.
But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, what does a country club have to offer people? It's community. And that's what I think this population that I'm talking about, that I'm experiencing, is missing. They don't have a community of people that, because they're working all the time, but I think that they need to appreciate that the community can offer them so much more than just their individual lifestyle. So I think that that's maybe one of the ways that we can go at it.
Is it fair to say that the wrong question is, how do we grow the church? The right question is, how do we serve people?
Right.
Jesus wasn't concerned about growing the church.
Yes.
He was concerned.
Yes.
Did everybody online and in the room hear Paul's comment?
Yes.
When you were over there talking, remember,
Yeah.
over here can't hear you if you're talking to that wall. So,
Understand?
you
You want me to say it again?
Sure.
Well, your last comment, so.
Yeah, Jesus his concern wasn't how do we grow the church? His concern was how do we serve people? How do we address their needs? How do we make their lives better?
And I beyond that, I think one of the things he said a lot was he thought about doing is healing people.
Yes.
And there are a lot of aspects in this particular country that need to be healed. How do we talk to one another? The mental health crisis is huge. Just being supportive to one another and talking about all the different issues we deal with.
Could I ask online, does anybody online have a comment, question?
Oh, yeah. Andrea, why don't you go?
Andrea.
Yes, so
JS also.
JS and then Andrew.
Oh, well, some of the conclusions that were drawn are, there's a lot more multifacetedness that needs also to be included. There are a lot of good things to be said for life stage programming, absolutely. But I also think there are and is room for programming that cuts across life stages. And that gives people, in the way of serving people, gives people tools and awareness and perspective about that they can take home with them and use in their day-to-day lives. So everybody could use, for example, Pastor Jeffrey's sermon on joy last week. Everybody can learn how to cultivate joy in their lives. There are ways of being able to present it that are age specific, even for 6 and 7-year-olds, as well as programs that use bigger words that can be directed towards different life stages, but it's all about joy. You could do it about gratitude, you could do it about love, nurturing, whatever. So that was one thing. A second thing is I get the wonderful nature of being able to get back together again face to face. I worry that it will come at the expense of vibrant online dynamic programming that can be done remotely, and groups of people that can meet together remotely. I say this because I've got a vested interest in that, being homebound, and I wouldn't be able to attend programs that are focused on face-to-face gatherings. Most of the social gatherings at church now don't include a virtual component now, and therefore people who are remote don't have a chance to participate in men's fellowship or First Sunday, or the variety of other that are basically social programs. And I think it would be beneficial for the church to have some way of including people on a remote basis in order to attract and serve the needs of people who are connect a lot via the internet.
Thanks, JS. Can I go to Andrea?
Well, I want to put a plug in for spectators, because I feel at this church, I am more of a spectator, even though I'm involved with several groups and I contribute a little bit. But it's nice to have found a safe haven where I'm not expected to raise my hand for everything, because that can get exhausting. So thank you for letting me be more or less a spectator. And I think there is a place for spectators who maybe contribute just a little bit. I do think community is like a main reason that I want to be part of a church. I mean, I've done a lot of soul searching over the course of my life, and I'm pretty comfortable with what I believe. I don't buy into all the tenets of WCC, but then again, there aren't really tenets that you have to buy into, so you feel comfortable. But on the other hand, I think a lot of people maybe haven't done a lot of soul searching. And so I think, like what JS said, broader topics that maybe aren't so tied to the liturgy and such, like joy. I mean, the four topics of Advent were nice, and to talk about the topics more than the liturgy, I think would be appealing to a lot of people who maybe don't go to church right now, because that will get them involved. I like Paul's comment about Jesus. I mean, really, it's more how do we serve people and how do you get people thinking about big topics more so than do I believe a certain thing? And I think the church does a pretty good job of that. I think that the more we focus on that, the more possibilities you have for more families. And also, I think that the idea of some different time meetings for some topics like what we're doing now, maybe have this at some different times, either during the week or what have you. You might catch some different people who can't come on a Sunday morning. And then let's just see. I think there are people who want to do a lot of soul searching, and so I think those broader topics are good, but there are also people who just want to sit back and relax. But I think those topics would be appealing to them as well. And I don't think we should underestimate how smart people are. And I think people want to go away from church thinking about things rather than just having been given something. So to the degree that we can incorporate those things, I think that's important.
Bravo.
So much wisdom in the room and on the line. So a number of people in the room have their hands up. I've seen Eleanor and Annika and Junior.
Well, I'm thinking of passages, theologians passages in the different stages of life. I'm in the older stage right now. We had 18 at First Friday the other night, and we could have had more. There are others that were connecting with us. But I really think that I see less emphasis on the name of Jesus. I think we should practice, adhere to his practices. But many of the prayers in our church have not used the name Jesus. I think that's sort of off-putting to people. I think community outreach is important. As far as attracting younger people, for Sunday schools, for teenagers, Sunday evenings is wonderful, if you can get them there, as evening groups. But as far as, young children in the community, the 3 ministers that brought in the most young people were Paul Allen, because he had Paul Allen, Martha Erasmus, and Jennifer Glykoff. Why? Because they were very strong, intelligent people with a great outreach and exuberance and love of neighbors. And when they came and became involved in the community, we had a tremendous influx of young people. I can remember, 80 to 100 from nursery school up to 8th grade. So I think that's very important. As you know, the 2 churches in Kenilworth have nursery schools that have. One's all things bright and beautiful, and one's something
Joyful Noise.
Yeah, and so they're building that way. But I think that's important. But I think it's important that we have community for each segment of life in our church and programs of support.
I'd like to,
Yeah.
I'd
You know,
like to second Eleanor's comments of the importance of getting young people involved. I think the church's growth has got to depend on young families. And the way to get them is to provide things that the kids really want to do, programming for children. I think it's important. Okay.
okay.
Yeah, gosh, I appreciate all of these comments that I've heard here in person, and also especially from people at home. And I'm thinking just of ways without repeating, just to kind of distill or synthesize. And I think something that struck me as being super important is thinking about ways, how can we nurture people, meeting them where they're at, and maybe also nudging them a little bit across a variety of modalities, targeting perhaps specific life stages, but then also to JS, to your point, making sure that we've got a lot of cross-pollination as well. That's so vital, and that's something that in our society we don't have so many opportunities to have happen all the time.
Intergenerationally.
Exactly, or different categories of mixing too. I think is one way to also promote vitality. If we can figure out the answers to those questions, how do we do that? That would give us something to ponder, and it would certainly, I just want to say, would be so worthwhile.
Junior, may I jump in? I want to tell a story. As some of you know, I'm a coach, in addition to other hats I wear. I coach churches in the Illinois Conference United Church of Christ. I had a coaching session on Friday with the church, and it was their lay leadership and their pastor. And bubbling up from the conversation came an idea. It's like so brilliant. One of the members said, remember, in confirmation, we have a mentor, confirmand relationship. This is pretty common in churches. You know what I'm talking about? Where not a teacher, not a pastor, not a parent, but an unrelated adult member of the congregation hooks up, partners with a confirmand over the course of the confirmation program. I've noticed as a pastor, sometimes those relationships continue into high school with the kid. So it wasn't my idea. From the group, imagine that. Somebody said, why don't we do that starting at a younger age? Where we attach an adult in the congregation, or maybe a family, to a child in another family. And they see themselves as mentoring that child. Not just a confirmation, but all the way through. all the way through,
Great idea.
including confirmation in high school. Making this point that church is one of the last places in society where unrelated people of different generations know each other by name. So they see each other in the hallway or at Target or whatever, and they say, oh yeah, how are you doing? I thought this was a great idea, and some churches have done something like this. They've hooked up a grandparent in the church with an unrelated child. And so you're kind of like, you're my church grandpa, you're my church grandma. So
It's a
that's,
great idea.
you know, so this idea of cross-pollination, intergenerational stuff, it's actually taking life stage ministry and blending it.
Yeah.
Blending one life stage with another life stage. So there are lots of ideas where the church can fill a need that nobody else seems to be needing.
Community building.
It is.
It is.
Okay, I've had my Gina.
Thank you. It all fits in together.
It's good.
I have two comments. One is Lynn's about this. So more people do not believe in God. And I remember one time when we had, where Wine Women in God, we talked about, what's your picture of God? And many people think of this old man on a cloud up there with a beard. But that's not God. But that's what we were taught as children. I mean, I think we all had that picture in our mind when we were children. So what is God? To me, God is love. Whenever you see love, whenever you see people working together, God is there. There's that energy that is God. But we don't talk about that very much. The second thing I wanted to say was related to what Lynn had to say. Again, she was talking about God, but also, what JS was saying. When we had groups talking about racism, we were doing it online. It was during COVID. There were people there from California, from Texas, from all over together talking about anti-racism, at least in my group. And it was marvelous because we did it online and we could have that opportunity, and you did too, Grace, of talking together no matter where. And so people who were on vacation or who had moved and left the church but still cared about the church were part of that discussion. So I think we should continue that as well.
Let's see, John, we haven't heard from you for a while.
I know it's been minutes.
And if you could speak up so folks at home could hear you.
Well, there's two things that well, there's two things, but there's two things I'd like to talk about. One is the personnel of, well, I'm a preacher's kid, as most of you know. So, I see the church from both sides. I have some. Well, Carol and I had a problem. We've been members of the church for quite some time, but at a certain point, there was a minister who was named in your presentation, and I'll not mention it, but he kept preaching about me and mine and ours and everything else like that, and we got to the point where when he would make references in his sermon, for instance, when he was talking about being brave, his illustration was he was brave as he was walking down the aisle with his daughter who was about to be baptized, about to be married. That's brave. That's bravery, stuff like that. And at a certain point, I got so tired of it that we started counting the times in the sermons he referred to himself, me and my man, and we got up to like what is it, nearly 20 instances when in his sermon he is illustrating about himself, how he was so successful. We didn't quit our membership of the church, but we started going to other churches where we didn't have to hear that kind of mush. Well, eventually he left, and then when we heard who were coming, we came back here again. So there is that one thing. The other thing I wanted to just say, if I may, is
John, if you could speak up, I know some people are having some trouble hearing you.
Oh, okay.
Thanks.
The other thing I wanted to mention was the children, attracting Well, attracting, I don't like that. Welcoming is, I think is a better word. But we're not selling advertising and attracting them to buy more candy bars or something. It's like, we want to include them and feel that they're included. And I was, this again is a personnel matter, but I think about families who are with just kids. And when the time comes for them during the service, and I do appreciate a time when there's a little children's time now. The minister who talks to the child isn't quite it. A minister who talks with the child is better. And maybe not to name any names, but if you think about that, a pastor who will call up the kids and have them sit down and then read from a book and not even look at the kids and not even sit with them and so on, but he'll read from his text and talk to the people sitting in the congregation, and the kids they're just decorations for this little message. And I don't think that that's welcoming families at all.
Thank you, John. We have 3 or 4 minutes. I do want to make sure you give a chance to Julie for any closing comments.
Do you want me to do that now?
Or
wait.
Lois, let's hear it from you and then turn it over to Julie.
Thank you, John. That's why my hand has been up for a very long time.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
My confirmation pastor, which built a church that was almost closing to 350 members in 5 years, never used the word "I" in a sermon. He was not focused on himself. He was focused on the environment around him and with them. He was a pastor with the people. Again, another point you made about preaching at the kids or at the congregation with them as decoration. The important thing to hear from the pulpit on Sunday morning is, one, that we can understand the last word in each sentence. So that has to do with style of speech, which should be taught in every sentence, right? Preaching and speech training are 2 different things. Unfortunately, they don't think so. I was hired to be a speech coach at Trinity Seminary, and the ones who really needed it refused to take the course. I found out to the instructor's horror when he suggested I do this. Anyhow, please, with a person who is coming eventually down the line, be aware, even in private discussions among the administration, that we look for an inclusive, not an individual bearing of the pastor's personal experiences for 3/4 of the sermon. Maybe I'm stepping on toes, but boy, I've been wanting to step on the throat of everyone.
Thank you. Thank you all for your wisdom, your passion, your engagement today. It was palpable. This is being recorded. We have a new link, so hopefully this will get to Patty Van Cleve's cloud account, so we can put it out to the congregation next week. Closing comments, Vice Chair of our congregation, Julie O'Connell.
I think it's a very exciting time to be at this church right now. I feel like we are open to
Yes.
becoming who we need to be in this community.
Yeah.
And I'm always awed by the intelligence of the people in the room and just how great we can be if we all work together.
Resolving.
In the room and on the line.
And online, yes, thank you, yes, thank you.